The scream cut through the palace's east wing, like glass shattering. Not a playful shriek, not a laugh that went too loud. A real scream, the kind that made your blood freeze and your training kick in before your brain caught up. Sergeant Thomas Wright was halfway down the marble corridor when he heard it. His body reacted before he consciously decided to move. Years of military training, of responding to threats, of knowing that hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. The scream came again, closer this time, and it had a word attached to it, a name. Sergeant Wright, Princess Charlotte. Wright's walk became a run. His radio was already in his hand, thumb hovering over the emergency button. The corridor ahead curved left toward the private gallery. That's where the sound came from. His mind catalogued everything as he moved. Exits, potential threats. Who else should be in this section of the palace at 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon? The list was short. This wing was typically quiet during this time. No scheduled events, no tours, just staff doing their routine work. He rounded the corner and saw her. Charlotte stood in the middle of the hallway, both hands pressed against a door. Not just any door, the entrance to the west storage rooms. Old furniture, archived documents, items waiting to be catalogued or moved to other locations. The door was closed. Charlotte was pushing against it, then pounding on it with small fists. "Help! Please, Sergeant Wright, help me!" But before we get into what happened next, make sure you hit that subscribe button on Crown Watch. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, back to the story. Wright reached Charlotte in seconds. She spun around when she heard his footsteps. Her face was flushed, eyes wide with something beyond simple fear. Panic. Real panic. She was still in her school uniform, navy blazer, white shirt, pleated skirt. Her hair had come partially loose from whatever style it had been in that morning. She looked small, younger than usual. "Princess Charlotte, what's wrong?" She grabbed his sleeve. Actually grabbed it. Royal children were taught from birth about appropriate physical contact, about maintaining composure, about representing the family with dignity at all times. Charlotte's hand clutched the fabric of his uniform jacket like she was drowning. "He locked the door," she said. Her voice came out higher than normal, words tumbling over each other. "I told him I needed to leave, and he locked the door, and I ran, but he's still in there, and I can't. Wright dropped to one knee, bringing himself to her eye level. "Keep calm. Don't scare her more. Get information." "Who locked the door, Charlotte?" She was shaking. He could see it now, the tremor running through her small frame. "Mr. Harwick. He's one of Camilla's private secretaries. He was showing me some old photographs, and then he locked the door and told me we had privacy now, and I didn't like how he said it. And I told him I needed to go to the bathroom, and he laughed and said I was being silly, and..." The rest came out in a rush, too fast to follow completely. But Wright had heard enough. Daniel Harwick. Wright knew the name, one of Queen Camilla's personal staff. Late 40s, corporate background before joining palace service. Always wore expensive suits. Always had that smooth charm that some people found reassuring and others found unsettling. Wright had found it unsettling. "Where are you supposed to be right now?" he asked Charlotte, keeping his voice steady. "With Mum. She's in a meeting that runs until 5. Mr. Herrick said he'd been asked to keep me entertained for an hour. He said Camilla personally requested it." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. She was trying very hard not to shed. "I didn't want to be rude, but something felt wrong, and I remembered what Mum told me about trusting my feelings, and I ran, and he didn't chase me. But he's still in there. And what if? You did exactly the right thing." Wright squeezed her shoulder gently. "I need you to do something for me now, all right? I need you to walk to the main security station. I know where it is." "Good, go there. Tell whoever's on duty, it should be Sergeant Morris. Tell him I sent you and that you're to stay there until your mother or I come to get you." Can you do that? Charlotte nodded. She was still shaking, but some colour was returning to her face. Having a task helped. Having an adult taking her seriously helped. What are you going to do? My job, Wright said simply. He watched her go, making sure she actually headed toward the security station before he turned his attention to the locked door. His hand went to his radio. Right to control. The response crackled back immediately. Go ahead, Wright. I need backup at the west storage entrance, east wing. I have a potentially unsafe situation involving palace staff. Also need confirmation on Queen Camilla's schedule, specifically whether she requested Princess Charlotte be supervised by her private secretary this afternoon. A pause. Then, backup en route. Stand by on the schedule check. Wright approached the door. It was old oak, original to the palace. Beautiful craftsmanship. Heavy. The lock was modern, though. Electronic keycard system installed during the security upgrade 3 years ago. He tried the handle anyway. Locked. He knocked. Professional. Controlled. Mr. Harwick, this is Sergeant Wright, Royal Guard. I need you to open this door, please. Nothing. Wright knocked again, harder this time. Mr. Harwick, open the door. Now. Still nothing. But Wright heard something else. Movement inside. Someone walking. The sound of something being shifted or moved. Whatever was happening in there. Harwick was aware that Wright was outside. He just wasn't responding. Wright's mind went to his training. Not palace protocol training. That came later. The earlier stuff. Military service. 7 years. Most of it in situations where reading a room wrong could get people killed. He'd learned to trust his gut when something felt off. This felt off. Charlotte's account could be innocent, could be a misunderstanding. A nervous child overreacting to a closed door and an adult she didn't know well. That was possible. But Charlotte wasn't a nervous child prone to overreacting. She was the daughter of the future king. She'd been raised in the most public family on earth. She'd learned to navigate complex social situations before she could write her own name. She'd been taught to be polite, accommodating, never to make a scene. For her to run screaming for help, something had to be genuinely wrong. Wright pulled out his master keycard. All senior guards had them, access to most palace rooms in case of emergency. He swiped it. The lock beeped. Red light. Access denied. He tried again. Red light. That was wrong. The MasterCards worked on storage rooms. Always. Wright had used his card on this very door 2 months ago when helping move some archived furniture. Someone had changed the access permissions. Footsteps approached from behind. Wright turned to see Sergeant Morris arriving, slightly out of breath. Charlotte's at the station, Morris said. What's the situation? Locked door. Palace staff member inside. Princess Charlotte reported feeling unsafe in his presence. He's not responding to requests to open the door, and someone's modified the electronic lock to prevent master keycard access. Morris's expression went hard. He was older than Wright, close to retirement. 30 years of service. He'd seen a lot. But this was clearly new territory. Your orders? Morris asked. Wright made a decision. I'm going in. If this is nothing, I'll accept the consequences. But I'm not standing here while a member of the royal family is potentially in danger, or while we don't know what's happening behind that door. The door's solid oak. Electronic lock override would take... I know. Wright looked at the door, calculating. The frame, the hinges, the weak points. But the frame is older. I can force it if I have to. Morris nodded slowly. I'll document that I agreed with your assessment of the threat. Wright appreciated that. Morris putting his own career on the line too. Backing his judgment. The radio crackled. Control to Wright. Confirmation on your query. Queen Camilla did not request supervision of Princess Charlotte this afternoon. She's currently at a charity event in South London. Her office has no record of any such arrangement. Wright and Morris locked eyes. Force the door, Morris said. Wright stepped back, measuring the distance. The door opened inward. That meant the hinges were on the inside. Couldn't remove them. But the frame was original 19th century construction. Wood, not reinforced steel like newer security doors. The lock plate was screwed into that old wood. He lifted his leg and drove his boot into the door just beside the handle. The impact jolted up his leg. The door shuddered, but held. Again. Harder this time. The wood around the lock plate started to splinter. Third kick. The frame cracked. The door flew inward, slamming against the interior wall. Wright went through fast, hand on his baton, scanning the room for threats. The storage room was larger than it looked from outside. Rows of shelving filled with archived materials. Old furniture covered in sheets. Boxes stacked along the walls. Dim light from windows set high in the far wall. The whole space smelled of dust and old paper. And there, in the back corner, stood Daniel Harwick. He was alone, no weapon visible. Just standing there in his expensive charcoal suit, hands in his pockets, expression calm, too calm. "Sergeant Wright," Harwick said pleasantly. "Was the dramatic entrance really necessary? You've damaged palace property." Wright didn't move from the doorway. His eyes swept the room again, looking for anything out of place, anything that would explain Charlotte's panic. "Where's Princess Charlotte?" Harwick asked. "She ran off before we finished our conversation. I was about to come looking for her." "Princess Charlotte is safe." Wright kept his voice level, professional. "She reported feeling unsafe in your presence. She said you locked the door." Harwick laughed. Actually laughed. Light, dismissive, the kind of laugh designed to make someone else feel ridiculous. "Is that what she said? Children and their imaginations." We were looking at old photographs, perfectly innocent activity, and I suppose she got bored and decided to create some excitement. He gestured around the room. "As you can see, there's nothing sinister happening here. Though I would appreciate if you'd knock next time rather than destroying a door that's probably worth more than your annual salary." Morris appeared in the doorway behind Wright. "The door was locked," Wright said. "She couldn't get out." "The door sticks sometimes," Harwick replied smoothly. "Old building, old doors. I'm sure she just couldn't work the handle properly. I would have helped her if she'd asked instead of running off." Wright took a step into the room. Something was wrong here. The explanation sounded reasonable, but Harwick's body language didn't match his casual tone. He was too still, too controlled, and his eyes kept flicking to something behind Wright. Not the door, something else. "My master keycard didn't work on the lock," Wright said. "Did you try it twice?" "Sometimes they need 2 swipes." "Access was denied." Harwick shrugged. "Take it up with maintenance. I'm not responsible for faulty card readers." Morris spoke up. "We've confirmed with Queen Camilla's office. She didn't arrange for you to supervise Princess Charlotte this afternoon." For the first time, Harwick's expression shifted. Just slightly. A flicker of something that might have been anger quickly smoothed over. "I'm certain there's been some miscommunication," he said. "I received a message this morning asking me to keep the princess occupied between 4:30 and 5 while her mother was in meetings. Perhaps it came through unofficial channels and wasn't properly logged. You know how it is with royal schedules. Things change constantly." "Show me the message," Wright said. "I'm sorry?" "The message you received this morning. Show it to me." Harwick's hand moved to his jacket pocket, then stopped. "I believe it was verbal. One of the other secretaries mentioned it in passing." "Which secretary?" "I don't recall. It was a busy morning." Wright took another step forward. His training was screaming at him now. The story kept changing. First Camilla requested it. Then it was a message. Then it was verbal. Each version subtly different, trying to find one that would stick. And Harwick's eyes kept moving to that spot behind Wright. Wright turned slightly, keeping Harwick in his peripheral vision, while looking at what had captured the man's attention. A small table near the door. Wright had passed it coming in, barely noticed it. Now he looked more carefully. A camera on a tripod, professional equipment. Powered on, there was a small red light indicating it was recordings or in standby mode. Next to it, a ring light, also powered on, though dimmed, and on the table itself, carefully arranged, several old photograph albums, the kind the Royal Collection kept in archives, but also something else, something that made Wright's stomach drop. A tablet, screen still lit. On that screen, a web page. Wright couldn't read it from this distance, but he could see enough. Chat interface, multiple usernames, streaming video setup. Morris saw it too. Wright heard the older sergeant's sharp intake of breath. "Mr. Harwick," Wright said, his voice gone very quiet, "I'm going to need you to stay exactly where you are." Harwick's pleasant expression cracked. "You're overstepping, Sergeant. I'm a member of the Queen's household staff." "You can't." "I can, and I am." Wright pulled out his radio. "Control, this is Wright. I need Detective Inspector Pierce here immediately. We have a potential criminal situation. Also need the Royal Collection Curator to verify some items." What happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it. But first, drop a comment and let us know. Would you have done the same thing in his position? Now, here's what the guard discovered. Wright moved to the table, while Morris kept position in the doorway, eyes on Harwick. Up close, the setup was even more damning than it had looked from across the room. The camera was angled toward a small cleared area near the window. Better lighting there. Someone had moved furniture aside to create a space. In that space, two chairs facing each other, child-sized distance apart. The photograph albums on the table were genuine Royal Collection items. Wright could see the archive tags, but they'd been selected deliberately. He flipped one open, images from the 1980s and 90s, young princes and princesses, innocent family photographs. Exactly the kind of material you'd use to make a child comfortable, to establish that this was official palace business. The tablet showed what appeared to be a streaming service, not YouTube or anything mainstream. Something else, something with a chat function where usernames were strings of numbers and letters. Anonymous. "This is absurd," Harwick said, but his voice had lost that smooth confidence. "You're constructing a narrative based on nothing. I was documenting archival materials for the collection. The camera is for work purposes. This is a complete misunderstanding that's going to cost you your position when I report this to—" "To who?" Morris asked from the doorway. "Queen Camilla, the woman who apparently didn't ask you to do any of this?" Harwick's jaw tightened. Wright looked at the camera more closely. It was running, not recording to an internal card, but connected wirelessly to something. The tablet, probably. He'd been live streaming, or getting ready to. The room's setup told a story. Get the child comfortable with official-looking activity. Lock the door so she can't leave. Position her in the well-lit area. Turn on the camera. Whatever happened next would be broadcast to whoever was watching on the other end of that anonymous streaming service. But Charlotte had trusted her instincts. She'd made an excuse and run. Wright felt sick. He also felt grateful beyond words that Charlotte had been smart enough, brave enough to get away before whatever Harwick had planned could happen. "Sergeant Morris," Wright said, not taking his eyes off Harwick. "Please secure that table and everything on it. Don't touch the electronics. They're evidence." "Evidence of what?" Harwick demanded. His voice rose. "This is harassment. I'm going to file a formal complaint. You have no authority to—" The door opened wider. Detective Inspector David Pierce stepped through, followed by two uniformed Metropolitan Police officers. Pierce was in his 50s, compact and sharp-eyed. He'd worked palace security liaison for a decade. Nothing much surprised him. This, apparently, did. Pierce took in the scene, the forced door, the camera setup, Harwick's defensive posture. Wright's protective stance near the evidence. "Sergeant Wright," Pierce said calmly. "Report." Wright laid it out, clearly and concisely. Charlotte's scream. Her account of being locked in with Harwick, the falsified authorization to supervise her, the locked door that shouldn't have been locked, the camera and streaming equipment, everything. Pierce listened without interrupting. Then he turned to Harwick. "Mr. Harwick, I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning. You're not under arrest at this time, but I would strongly suggest you cooperate." "I want my solicitor," Harwick said immediately. "That's your right." Pierce nodded to the officers. They moved to flank Harwick, not touching him, but making their presence clear. "Officers will escort you to an interview room. Do not attempt to access any electronic devices. Do not contact anyone. Am I clear?" Harwick's face had gone very pale. He looked at Wright with something that might have been hatred or might have been fear. Hard to tell. As the officers led Harwick out, Pierce approached the table. He pulled out his phone and started photographing everything without touching anything. "The tablet's still connected," Pierce said quietly. "Streaming service is still active. I'm going to need the tech team here to preserve this before we shut it down." He looked at Wright. "Where's Princess Charlotte now?" "Security station with Sergeant Morris." Wright stopped. Morris was right here. Had been the whole time. Morris caught Wright's confusion. "Corporal Davies took over when I came to back you up. Charlotte's with him." "I need to interview her," Pierce said, but gently. "And with her mother present." "Princess Kate's in a meeting until 5, Wright said. "Not anymore." Pierce showed Wright his phone. A text message from Palace Communications. "Meeting concluded early. Princess of Wales en route to security station." Someone had called Kate, told her what was happening. She was already moving. Wright felt a weight lift slightly. Charlotte would have her mother soon. That was good. That was important. Pierce studied the room again. "You made the right call forcing that door, Sergeant. If you waited for authorization, we might not have caught this." He paused. "We might not have caught him before." He didn't finish, didn't need to. Wright's mind filled in the blank easily enough. Before he did whatever he'd planned to do, before Charlotte became a victim instead of a lucky escape. "I need your statement," Pierce said. "Detailed timeline, exact words Charlotte used, everything you observed. But first, I imagine Princess Kate will want to speak with you." Wright nodded. His hands, he noticed, were shaking slightly. Adrenaline wearing off. The full impact of what almost happened settling in. A young girl, royal or not, famous or not, just a young girl who'd been targeted by someone who'd infiltrated palace staff, specifically to gain access to her. How long had Harwick been planning this? How long had he been working his way into a position of trust, building his credentials, waiting for the right opportunity? The questions made Wright feel cold. Morris clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good, lad. Trust your gut, you always said. You trusted it today." "Charlotte trusted hers," Wright replied. "She's the one who got away." They secured the room and headed toward the security station. Word had spread fast. Palace staff whispered in doorways. Guards stood at heightened alert. The usual, calm efficiency of the palace had shifted into something more tense and watchful. The security station was on the ground floor, east side. Small room, mostly monitors and communication equipment. Designed for guards to rotate through, not for comfort. When Wright arrived, he found Princess Kate sitting in one of the chairs. Charlotte was on her lap. Too old to be sitting on her mother's lap normally, but today wasn't normal. Charlotte's face was pressed into her mother's shoulder. Kate's arms wrapped around her daughter, with the kind of fierce protectiveness that transcended royal dignity or public image. Corporal Davies stood respectfully to the side, trying to look at nothing in particular. Kate looked up when Wright entered, Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "Sergeant Wright." He stood at attention instinctively. "Ma'am." "Charlotte told me what happened, what you did." Kate's hand smoothed her daughter's hair gently. "Thank you doesn't seem adequate, but thank you." "I was doing my job, ma'am." You believed her immediately. You didn't dismiss her concerns or tell her she was overreacting. You treated her fear as legitimate, and you acted to protect her. Kate's voice caught slightly. "That's more than doing your job. That's caring about the person you're sworn to protect." Charlotte lifted her head from her mother's shoulder. Her face was blotchy from crying, but she looked directly at Wright. "I'm sorry I screamed," she said quietly. "It wasn't very dignified." Wright's heart broke a little. Here she was, apologizing for being afraid, worried about dignity, when she'd just escaped something terrible. "You did exactly the right thing," Wright told her. "Being dignified isn't as important as being safe. You trusted your feelings, you got away, and you called for help. Those were all exactly right." "Father always says you're one of the best guards," Charlotte said. "He said if I ever needed help, you and Sergeant Barrett were the ones to find." Wright glanced at Kate, who nodded confirmation. "Charlotte has certain safety protocols," Kate explained. "Specific guards she's been told to trust completely if she ever feels unsafe, regardless of who else tells her what to do." "You're on that list." That explained why Charlotte had called his name specifically. Not just the nearest guard, him in particular. "I'm honored by that trust," Wright said. Detective Inspector Pierce appeared in the doorway. "Princess Kate, I hate to intrude, but I need to ask Charlotte some questions. It won't take long, and you can be present throughout." Kate's arms tightened around Charlotte. "Is that absolutely necessary right now?" "I'm afraid so. The sooner we document everything, the stronger the case will be." Pierce's voice was gentle, but firm. "I promise I'll be as quick as possible." Kate looked down at Charlotte. "Do you feel up to talking about it, darling?" Charlotte nodded against her mother's shoulder. The interview took 20 minutes. Pierce asked questions carefully, never pushing, always giving Charlotte time to answer. Wright and Morris both stayed. Pierce wanted Wright's observations on the record alongside Charlotte's account, making sure the timelines matched. Charlotte's description was heartbreakingly clear. Howick had approached her after school, said he'd been asked to show her some interesting historical photographs. Royal collection business. Very official sounding. He'd led her to the storage room, shown her the albums, genuine palace materials, so it seemed legitimate. Then he'd locked at the door. Charlotte demonstrated how she'd tried the handle. Locked from the inside, requiring a key she didn't have. Hurrick had told her they had privacy now. Time to take some special photographs. Just her. For a private collection. Very exclusive. He gestured to the chairs, asked her to sit. That's when Charlotte's instincts had screamed in danger. The way he said it, the way he looked at her, the locked door, the camera she could see, now that he'd drawn attention to it. She'd told him she needed the bathroom. He'd said she could wait. She'd insisted. He'd laughed and said she was being silly. She'd run for the door anyway, yanking on the handle, pounding on it when it wouldn't open. Hurrick had taken a step toward her. That's when Charlotte had screamed, as loud as she could. Wright's name, specifically, because her father had told her Wright would help if she needed it. Howick had stopped, frozen. Clearly hadn't expected her to scream. Charlotte had kept screaming and pounding until she heard footsteps in the corridor. Then, Howick had moved to the back of the room, away from the door, creating distance, making it look innocent. Charlotte had heard Wright's voice through the door, and somehow, she didn't know how, maybe panic strength, she'd managed to wrench the handle hard enough to break the internal lock mechanism. The door had swung open, and she'd run. That detail made Wright revise his earlier understanding. She hadn't just been pounding on the door when he arrived. She'd already escaped. She'd been trying to keep Harwick contained, making sure he couldn't follow her until Wright got there. Brave didn't begin to cover it. Pierce finished his notes. Charlotte, you did everything right. Everything. Do you understand that? She nodded. Nothing that happened was your fault, and nothing worse is going to happen, because you were smart and brave. What about Mr. Harwick? Charlotte asked quietly. He's going to face consequences, Pierce said. Serious ones. But that's not something you need to worry about. That's for adults to handle. Kate stood, Charlotte still in her arms, despite being a bit big for it. Are we finished here? For now, Pierce confirmed. We'll need to follow up, but that can wait. Kate carried Charlotte out. Wright watched them go, the Princess of Wales abandoning all pretense of formal dignity. Just a mother protecting her child. Detective Inspector Pierce turned to Wright once they were alone. The tech team is analysing the tablet and camera equipment now. Preliminary findings suggest Harwick was connected to a network of individuals sharing this type of content. The streaming service appears to be linked to multiple other users, possibly other palace employees or people with access to royal family members. Wright felt sick. How many? We don't know yet, but this wasn't isolated. Harwick was part of something bigger. Pierce closed his notebook. Your intervention today didn't just save Princess Charlotte. You potentially exposed an entire network. We're approaching the moment that changed everything. If you haven't subscribed to Crown Watch yet, do it now. We share stories like this every single day. Now let's get to what happened when the truth came out. The investigation moved fast. By evening, 3 other members of palace staff had been quietly detained for questioning. All of them connected to Queen Camilla's household in some capacity. All of them with access to royal children during specific events or activities. The palace, of course, said nothing publicly. No press release, no official comment. That's how these things were handled. Quietly, internally, efficiently. But inside the palace, everything changed. Security protocols were revised immediately. New clearance procedures, additional background checks, mandatory monitoring for any staff member who had one-on-one access to royal children. Queen Camilla's household came under intense scrutiny. Not her personally, nobody suggested she'd known what her staff members were doing, but her office, her team, her hiring practices, everything. 3 days later, Wright was called to a private office in the palace's north wing. He'd been there before. Administrative meetings, routine briefings, but today felt different. Princess Anne was waiting for him. The Princess Royal stood by the window, looking out at the gardens. She turned when Wright entered, and he snapped to attention. Sergeant Wright, sit down, please. He sat. Anne remained standing, studying him with that sharp, assessing gaze she was famous for. I've read the reports, she said. All of them. Inspector Pierce's investigation, Charlotte's statement, your account of events, Sergeant Morris's corroboration. She paused. What you did required more than just following protocol. It required judgment. The kind of judgment that comes from actually caring about the people you're assigned to protect, not just going through the motions. Wright said nothing. Anne wasn't finished. Charlotte is 11 years old. She's been raised with every advantage, yes, but also with every pressure. The scrutiny, the expectations, the knowledge that her entire life will be lived in public. Anne's voice softened slightly. She's also a child who deserves to feel safe in her own home. What you did gave her that. I'm glad I was there, Ma'am. So am I. So is her family. Anne moved to the desk, picked up a folder. Your service record is impressive. 7 years military, multiple commendations. Transferred to Royal Protection 5 years ago. Excellent marks across the board. You're being considered for promotion to the Close Protection team. Wright kept his expression neutral. Close Protection meant travelling with the royals, being part of their immediate security detail rather than palace grounds. It was a significant step up. The king asked me to speak with you personally, Anne continued. He wanted you to know that your actions reflect the values this family expects from those who serve them. Courage, yes, but also compassion. The wisdom to know when rules matter less than people. She held out a small box. Wright stood, accepted it. Inside was a medal, the Royal Victorian Order, given for personal service to the monarch or royal family. This is private recognition, Anne said. No ceremony, no press announcement. That's how Charlotte wants it. She doesn't want what happened to become public spectacle. But your service won't go unrecognized. Wright looked at the medal, then at Anne. Ma'am, I was just doing your job. Yes, I know. That's what makes you good at it. Anne's expression warmed slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. My mother always valued the guards who saw beyond the titles to the people underneath, who protected us as human beings, not just as symbols. You did that for Charlotte. The meeting ended shortly after. Wright returned to duty, the medal tucked away in his locker. He didn't tell anyone about it. That wasn't why he'd done what he'd done. 2 weeks later, the full extent of what they'd uncovered became clear. Harwick had been part of a network involving 7 people. Total. 3 palace staff members, 2 photographers with press credentials, and 2 technology specialists who managed the secure streaming service. They'd been operating for almost 2 years. Charlotte wasn't the first child they'd targeted. But thanks to her bravery and Wright's response, she would be the last. All 7 were arrested. The evidence was overwhelming. The streaming setup, chat logs, payment records. The tablet had contained enough information to trace the entire network. The trials were private. Reporting restrictions protected the victims. But Wright heard through official channels that all 7 received substantial prison sentences. Harwick himself got 12 years. Queen Camilla's household underwent complete restructuring. Half her staff were reassigned or let go. New leadership brought in. Enhanced vetting procedures implemented. Camilla made no public comment, but she did speak privately to Kate and William. Wright wasn't present for that conversation, but he heard it had been brief and painful. Whatever relationship existed between Camilla and her stepson's family, it was strained further by the knowledge that predators had hidden within her own staff. For Charlotte, the recovery was slower. Wright saw her around the palace occasionally. She always smiled and waved, but he noticed the changes. She stayed closer to her parents. She didn't wander alone anymore. She asked more questions about who people were and why they were there. The trust had been damaged. Not destroyed, but damaged. 3 months after the incident, Kate approached Wright in the palace corridor. Sergeant Wright, do you have a moment? Of course, ma'am. They walked together toward the gardens. Kate seemed to be choosing her words carefully. Charlotte still talks about what you did, she said finally. About how you believed her immediately, how you didn't hesitate. Any guard would have... No. Kate stopped walking, turned to face him directly. Any guard should have. Not all would have. Some would have worried about overstepping, about damaging palace property, about the consequences of accusing a senior staff member without absolute proof. Her eyes were fierce. You put Charlotte's safety above all of that. You trusted her instincts over your concerns about protocol. She deserved to be believed, Wright said simply. Yes, she did. Kate resumed walking. She's doing better now. Still cautious, but better. Therapy is helping. Time is helping. And knowing that there are people like you protecting her, that helps too. They reached the garden entrance. Kate paused there. William and I wanted you to know something. When we talk to our children about safety, about who to trust if they ever feel threatened, your name comes up. Not as one of the guards, specifically you, by name, as someone they can absolutely count on. Wright felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. Heavy, but not unwelcome. I won't let them down, ma'am. I know you won't, Kate smiled, and for a moment she looked less like the future queen and more like a mother who was grateful her child was safe. Thank you, Sergeant Wright. Truly. She left. Wright stood in the garden entrance, looking out at the carefully maintained paths and flower beds. The palace stretched behind him, centuries of history and tradition and protocol, but also people. Real people who laughed and cried and sometimes felt afraid. That's what the uniform was really for. Not the ceremony, not the tradition, the people. Wright returned to his post, committed to remembering that every single day. The palace released one brief statement 3 months after the incident, carefully worded, legally vetted, revealing nothing specific. Following an internal security review, several staff members have been dismissed, and law enforcement has taken appropriate action regarding serious allegations. The royal family's safety protocols have been enhanced. No further comment will be made. That was it. 41 words, summarizing a nightmare almost realized, and a network of predators dismantled. But for those who knew the real story, those words carried the weight of what could have been, and the gratitude for what was prevented. Charlotte continued growing up in the public eye, attending events, smiling for cameras, learning what it meant to be royal. But she also learned something else that day in the storage room. She learned that her instincts mattered, that her fear was valid, that when something felt wrong, it was okay to run, to scream, to demand help. She learned that there were people who would believe her and protect her. And perhaps most importantly, she learned that being royal didn't mean being alone. It meant being surrounded by people who took their duty to protect her seriously. Not just her title or her position, but her as a person. Wright never spoke publicly about what happened. The medal stayed in his locker. He continued his duties, was eventually promoted to the close protection team, travelled with the royal family on official visits. And every time he saw Charlotte at an event or ceremony, she would catch his eye and offer a small smile, a private acknowledgement of what they both knew. She had trusted her instincts. He had trusted her. Together, they had prevented something terrible. Sometimes, that's what duty looked like. Not the ceremonial uniform or the formal protocols, just a child brave enough to run and an adult willing to break down a door to reach her. It's a reminder that protecting people, really protecting them, means listening when they say something's wrong. It means trusting their fear even when you can't see the threat. It means understanding that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who've learned to blend in, to seem trustworthy, to use official positions and smooth words to gain access to victims. Harwick had counted on people dismissing a child's fear. He'd counted on adults prioritizing protocol over instinct. He'd counted on the palace's natural tendency toward discretion, preventing anyone from making a scene. He hadn't counted on Charlotte being brave enough to scream for help. And he hadn't counted on a guard who valued people over procedures. That combination, a child who trusted her instincts and an adult who believed her, made all the difference. If this story showed you something about the Royal Guards you didn't know before, make sure you're subscribed to Crown Watch. We share these untold stories from inside the palace every single day. Tomorrow's story is even more shocking. A royal guard discovers what Camilla's staff has been doing with palace antiques, and what he finds in the locked vault will leave you speechless. You won't want to miss it. Drop a comment below and let us know. Do you think Charlotte's parents should have been told about the safety protocols that allowed this to happen in the first place? We'll see you in the next one.